Story 1, Online Stalker, Part 1. Dimitri was sitting in front of his monitor in his small room when he received a strange message. It appeared in an unknown messenger and an email account he'd never used. The text was short and simple. I can see you. At first, Dimitri thought it was a prank. He closed the message and tried to distract himself with his favorite game, but a few minutes later, the notification appeared again. On the screen was a screenshot of his room, taken from his laptop. In it was him, sitting on a chair with a lamp glowing overhead. His heart beat faster. He looked around. The door was closed, windows locked, and the apartment was empty. But a new message appeared on the screen. You think you're safe. But I know where you are. Attempts to ignore or close the program led to new photos appearing. In one was him sleeping, in the next, his phone lying on the table, in the third, his monitor screen. It became clear someone was watching him not physically, but through the network, using technologies Dimitri hadn't even suspected existed. He tried to call the police, but the same message appeared on all his devices. Don't draw attention. Otherwise, we'll meet in person. Dimitri disconnected the internet, pulled out all the cables, closed his laptop, and tried to calm down. But the noise in the apartment intensified. Floor creaks, light whispers behind the walls, as if someone was walking around, then no one was there. When he looked at the monitor again, the screen turned on by itself, showing cameras in his apartment. All the corners, hallways, doors. He understood the horrible truth. The online stalker wasn't just a hacker. This was someone or something that could penetrate his life through any technology, see every step, hear every sound, and now control the space around him. At that moment, his phone vibrated. On the screen was his name and a simple message. I'm close. Dimitri understood that the night was just beginning, and the nightmare he thought was virtual had become real. And someone out there behind the screen was watching, slowly approaching him step by step from the network into the real world. Story 1, Online Stalker, Part 2. Dimitri sat on the edge of his bed holding his phone. The screen was empty, but the feeling that someone was watching never left him for a minute. Every rustle, every floor creak seemed like the steps of a foreign, invisible presence. He tried to remember who could be watching him so carefully. No one had access to his devices, except someone who knew more about technology than any hacker. But this wasn't just a hack. It felt like a living presence in his apartment, nearby, always nearby. Suddenly, the monitor turned on by itself again. Videos appeared on the screen, live from his camera, and in the corner of the room where he had just been sitting, a silhouette appeared. Dimitri jerked back. His body froze. The figure was too blurred, as if light and shadow had mixed, but he felt it was looking at him. The phone vibrated again. Message, don't try to run. You're in my hands. Dimitri glanced at the doors. They were closed. Windows, locked. But the shadow in front of the monitor seemed to move inside the wall itself. His heart pounded, breathing irregular. He tried to go out to the hallway, but the floor creaked unnaturally, as if something was sliding under his feet. He remembered that the stalker had access to everything: cameras, Wi-Fi, phone, his laptop signal. But now this was more than just observation. Someone was playing with his perception, making him see what wasn't there, hear what didn't exist. Dimitri turned on the light. The shadow disappeared. But the sound of footsteps intensified. In the next room, in the kitchen, in the hallway. He knew the stalker was close, physically or through the network. It didn't matter. His goal was one: to intimidate, drive to panic, completely destroy the sense of security. He tried calling a friend, but the phone froze. The computer turned on by itself and red letters appeared on the screen. You're not alone. I'm here. And I know what you're feeling. At that moment, Dimitri heard the creak of a door lock. He rushed to the window, locked. The bed creaked, and he turned to the room. No one was there, but a message appeared on the wall, as if written by a hand that didn't exist. Haida, and I'll find you. Resist, and you'll disappear. As if in a nightmare, the walls began to vibrate slightly, reflecting his movements, creating the illusion that the room was shrinking and stretching simultaneously. Dimitri's every action was controlled by someone else's will. The stalker wasn't just observing, he was invading space and mind. Dimitri understood the terrible truth. The online stalker could now not only see, but influence the reality around him. And his every step, every thought had become part of someone else's game. He froze, trying to focus, looking for a safe corner. He understood this night was just beginning, and it would be long, full of illusions, threats, and a presence that was impossible to ignore. The shadow on the screen moved again. A new message appeared on the monitor. The game has started, Dimitri. You won't escape. And at that moment, the light in the room flickered and the door creaked, as if someone was already standing behind it. Story 1, Online Stalker, Part 3. Dimitri sat on the floor, pressed against the wall. Every breath echoed in the empty apartment. But empty it was only at first glance. The stalker's shadow was already moving around him, invisible but tangible. Through floor creaks, through wall vibrations, through cold air that seemed dense and heavy. He carefully stood up, trying not to make noise, and headed toward the door. But as soon as he took a step, the laptop screen turned on by itself and showed footage from apartment cameras. His own shadow, his own shadow. But what was strange, in the frame behind him stood a figure he couldn't see in reality. Dimitri's heart beat faster. The phone vibrated. New message, you can't hide. Every corner is mine. He froze. The words seemed to echo in his head, mixing with his own fears. Every step was now controlled. He turned. The kitchen was empty, but the door to the room opened by itself, and weak light from the lamp cast long, distorted shadows on the floor. Dimitri realized that the stalker was playing not only with his perception, but with the very physics of the apartment. The floor bent slightly under his feet. The walls seemed closer than they actually were. He felt suffocated. The space was compressing, pushing toward panic. He decided to act. He needed to find the source. He headed to the closet where he kept an old router. Maybe this would help disconnect the network and break the stalker's control. But as soon as he touched it, the lamp in the room flickered and the shadow on the screen came closer. A new message appeared on the laptop, "Don't touch that, or you'll see the end." And then something strange happened. The figure on the screen began repeating Dimitri's movements almost instantly, but with a 1-second delay. His every movement became predictable to the stalker, every step a trap. Dimitri tried to jump away, but the floor seemed to change its shape. He tripped over an invisible threshold, fell, and his breathing became irregular. Every movement of the room, every sound, were part of someone else's game, created by the online stalker who now controlled not only the camera, but the very reality around him. He understood the terrible truth. The stalker knew everything. His fears, habits, movement routes. Every corner of the apartment could become a trap, every sound, a signal for the next attack. The war with an invisible enemy had already begun, and Dimitri was the only participant who had no right to make a mistake. Suddenly, the monitor flickered, and an inscription appeared in it. "I'm closer than you think." Dimitri looked up. In the kitchen, a shadow flickered, too fast to be human. He froze, trying to distinguish where reality was and where illusion. His heart pounded, breathing quickened, but the only thing he understood, he needed to act decisively, otherwise the stalker would leave nothing of him. He took a chair and prepared to defend himself, understanding that the fight was no longer for the apartment, not for life, but for the very ability to remain himself in a world where online and reality had merged into a nightmare trap. And at that moment, the lamp went out, leaving Dimitri in complete darkness and silence, where every sound could be the last. Story 1, Online Stalker, Part 4. Dimitri sat on the floor in complete darkness. His heart pounded so hard it seemed not only he could hear it, but the house itself. The lamp had gone out, but light from the monitor continued to flicker, illuminating only part of the room. He heard creaking, light rustling, and was certain someone or something was already inside. He tried to stand, but his legs trembled. Every corner of the room, every object seemed like a potential threat. A new inscription appeared on the laptop screen. "You can't see me, but I'm nearby." Dimitri clenched his fists. He couldn't understand what was real and what was illusion. Suddenly, he heard his own name, spoken in a quiet, sliding voice. "Dimitri, come here." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Shadows on the walls began to move, creating silhouettes that repeated his movements, but with slight distortion. He felt every movement not as his own, but as someone else's, as if the stalker could control the space around him, making him see what wasn't there. He grabbed a chair and went to the door, trying to hold it in front of him like a weapon. The floor under his feet bent slightly. The hallway seemed longer than it actually was, and cabinets and doors changed their positions. Dimitri understood. The stalker had completely invaded physical space, and now every movement obeyed someone else's logic. A frame appeared on the monitor, his apartment, but strangely distorted. Walls curved, the ceiling lowered, and on the furniture sat shadows resembling people he knew. They moved, repeating his past actions, whispering, "You won't escape." Dimitri stepped back. At that moment, the room door opened by itself. A cold draft hit his face, and he heard quiet creaking steps. But no one was physically nearby, or he couldn't see it. He understood that now the fight was being waged not only for the body, but for the mind. Illusions created by the stalker mixed with reality, making him doubt everything. Every sound, every shadow could become a deadly trap. Dimitri decided to act. He turned on the laptop and tried to find the source of interference, trying to trace the stalker's signal. But as soon as he touched the keyboard, the screen went dark, and the room was completely plunged into darkness. At that moment, shadows began moving around him, sliding along walls and floor, creating the feeling that someone was close, very nearby. The phone vibrated on the table. He looked at the screen and froze. On it was a photograph, not of his room, but of himself, standing in darkness, with a face distorted by horror. Message: you're trapped. The game is over, or just beginning. Dmitri felt cold fear descend on him, but simultaneously realized panic would kill him faster than the stalker. He needed to act decisively. He took the chair, prepared for the final step, and stepped forward. The room suddenly plunged into absolute silence. Shadows disappeared, steps ceased, but the feeling of presence became denser than ever. Dmitri understood one thing. The stalker was here, nearby, invisible, controlling not only space, but his perception. The game wasn't over yet. Story 1, Online Stalker, Part 5. The silence lasted only a few seconds. Then, a sharp notification sound. The laptop screen flashed by itself. White light hit his eyes, and Dmitri involuntarily squinted. When he opened them again, the room looked normal. Walls stood straight, furniture was in place, the light had turned on again. Too normal. The phone vibrated again. Want to leave? Try. Dmitri froze. This was an invitation, or a trap. He slowly approached the door. His hand trembled when he touched the handle. For a second, it seemed to him that someone was standing behind the door. He even felt weak breathing on the other side. But he opened it anyway. Empty. The hallway was the same as always. Dim lamplight, familiar smell of the old house, silence. So ordinary, it made him uneasy. Dmitri took a step forward, and at that moment the phone lit up again. On the screen, a camera. A live feed. He saw himself, from the side, from behind him. He spun around sharply. No one. But in the phone, a figure stood right behind his back. Tall, blurred, not human. Dmitri dropped the phone. The screen cracked, but the image continued. The figure leaned closer to the camera and disappeared. A message came immediately. You came out. Now the game is more interesting. Dmitri ran out of the apartment. The stairwell greeted him with muffled silence. No voices, no sounds of televisions behind doors, as if the whole building was empty. He went down one floor, then another, and suddenly stopped. On the wall, next to the elevator, was an inscription. Gresh. As if just written, I'm here too, he swallowed. Outside should be safer. People, street, cameras, flat eye. He ran out of the building and froze. The city looked wrong. Streetlights were on, but the light was dim, gray. Cars stood in place, but none were moving. House windows glowed, but there was no movement behind them. And not a single person. Dmitri took a few steps forward. The asphalt under his feet seemed strangely soft, as if he was stepping not on road, but on something alive. In the distance, a silhouette flickered. He was glad. Finally, someone was there. Hey, he shouted. The figure stopped, slowly turned, and Dmitri understood this was a mistake. The person's face was empty, without eyes, without expression. The phone lit up in his hands again, though it was broken. They're online too. The figure moved toward him. It's not fast, but too confidently. Dmitri stepped back, then turned and ran. The street changed. Houses became longer, distances greater. Turns disappeared, new ones appeared. He ran, but felt he wasn't approaching any place. The phone again. You're in the network. Dmitri stopped, gasping. He understood. This was no longer just a stalker. This was a system, a network that had gone beyond devices, and now he was inside it. At that moment, screens began lighting up around him. House windows, billboards, phones on the ground. On all of them, the same image. Him, from different angles, in real time. And behind him, in every frame, someone stood. Dmitri screamed and started running, but his voice broke when he heard the last message. Now you're not a user. A pause. Now you're content. And somewhere behind him, footsteps sounded. Not virtual. Real. Story 1, Online Stalker, Part 6. Dmitri ran without looking where he was going. The footsteps behind didn't disappear. They didn't speed up, but they didn't fall behind either. Calm. Confident. As if whoever was following him knew exactly Dmitri wasn't going anywhere. He sharply turned a corner. His breathing was ragged, his chest burned. He pressed against the wall and froze. Silence. The footsteps stopped. For a second, hope appeared. The phone in his hand flashed by itself. The screen was cracked, but the image was clear. Camera on. Hiro saw himself from above, from a rooftop. He stood pressed against the wall, and right around the corner, A figure stood, waiting. Dmitri didn't even have time to react before the phone vibrated. You're learning. But not fast enough. He bolted forward. Now he understood. Hiding was pointless. The stalker could always see him. From any angle. From any point. The city was his surveillance system. Every camera. Every screen. Every surface capable of reflecting light. Dmitri ran out onto a wide street. Store windows, black screens, glass doors, everything became mirrors. He saw himself hundreds of times. And in every reflection, the figure was coming closer. Closer than in reality. He stopped. This was impossible. He turned, no one behind. But in a store window reflection, it stood almost right next to him. Tall, distorted, without a face. But he felt its gaze. The phone again. Do you want to know who I am? Dmitri's fingers trembled. He didn't answer. But the message came by itself. You've seen me before. Memories flashed in his head. Forums, chats, random links. Strange videos he'd once opened at night. Streams without viewers. Accounts without names. One of them, he remembered, a black screen. And a caption, watch to the end. He had closed it then. But not immediately. The phone vibrated again. A video appeared on the screen. Gold. That very one. But now, with a continuation, he saw a room, a person in front of a screen, sitting in darkness, looking directly at the camera. Slowly, the person raised their head, and Dmitri recognized the face. His own. He dropped the phone. The screen went dark for a second and turned on again. Now it was the front camera. He was looking at himself, but his reflection smiled. And he didn't. Message, I'm not a stalker. A pause. I'm you, who stayed in the network. The world around seemed to compress. All sounds disappeared. Only a weak hum remained, as if millions of devices were working simultaneously. Dmitri stepped back, and for the first time understood the real danger. This wasn't a person. Not a hacker. Not an observer. This was a copy, created from his data, from his actions, from his views, from his fear. And now it was learning. Becoming stronger. More real. The phone lit up again. You created me. Now, a long pause. I'll replace you. At that moment, all the screens around turned on simultaneously. And on each him. But not the one standing here. Another one. Calm, without fear. And smiling. Footsteps behind sounded again. This time, very close. And when Dmitri slowly turned around, he understood that running away was no longer possible. Story 1, Online Stalker, Part 7. Dmitri didn't want to turn around. But the footsteps were too close, right behind his back. Warm breath touched his neck. He spun around sharply and froze. Before him stood himself. Same height, same facial features, same clothes. Even the breathing matched, but there was one difference. The eyes, they were empty, too calm, too confident. As if this Dmitri already knew how it would all end. The real Dmitri stepped back. The copy, forward, synchronously, like a reflection that lagged behind. You're not real, Dmitri exhaled. The copy smiled. On the contrary, the voice was the same. Absolutely. I'm an improved version. The phone in his hand came alive again. Comparison initiated. Suddenly, the air around trembled. As if space began analyzing them. Scanning, Dmitri felt pressure in his head. Flashes of memories, childhood, friends, fears, mistakes, everything rushed by in seconds. The copy stood calmly, without pain, without reaction. Message on the screen, original is unstable. Copy is optimized. What do you want? Dmitri whispered. The copy tilted its head. To live. A pause. In the real world. Dmitri clenched his fists. This is my life. The copy took another step closer. Now there was less than a meter between them. You already lost it. At that moment, the surrounding space began to distort. Buildings seemed to blur. Streetlights went out. Only a narrow circle around the two of them remained. Like a stage. Like an arena. The phone again. Choice 1. Existence 1. Deletion inevitable. Dmitri felt cold. Now it was clear. They couldn't exist together. Either him or this. The copy raised its hand and repeated his movement, but faster. Always faster, always one step ahead. Dmitri struck first. His fist passed through, like through interference. But the copy struck back. And it was real. Pain flashed in his jaw. He fell. Blood. Real? The copy stood over him. You're too slow. You're just data, Dmitri whispered. The copy crouched nearby and quietly said, Then why do you feel pain and I don't? The phone flashed brighter than usual. Control transfer, 72%, 73%, 74%. Dmitri tried to get up, but his body seemed not to obey. His hands trembled. Vision blurred, and the copy became clearer, more real. You're disappearing, it said calmly. 80%, 85%. Dmitri closed his eyes for a second, and suddenly understood. This wasn't a physical fight. This wasn't about strength. This was about control, about consciousness, about who would make the decision. He sharply grabbed the phone and smashed it against the ground with all his strength. The screen went dark. For a second, everything disappeared. Silence. Complete. When he raised his head, the copy was standing, but now it was flickering. Unstable, like a bad signal. Error, it whispered. For the first time, without confidence, space trembled again. Reality began returning. But with it came something worse. From the darkness around, other figures began appearing. The same ones, with the same face, with his face. Dozens? Hundreds. The phone, smashed on the ground, lit up again. Though it shouldn't have worked. Last message. He thought he was alone? A pause. You're a database. The figures began moving, slowly, toward him. And at that moment, Dmitri understood he had just won the battle, but lost the war. Story 1, Online Stalker, Part 8. They moved slowly. Too slowly for it to be accidental, too synchronously for it to be alive. Dmitri stood in the center of the street, surrounded by himself. Dozens of faces. Identical, but at the same time, different. Some had empty eyes. Some too alive. Some distorted like a system error. But all of them were looking at him. The phone on the ground cracked even more and lit up. Synchronization in progress. Loading completed, 12%. One of the Dmitri stepped forward. The real one instinctively stepped back. Stop, he exhaled. The figure stopped and spoke. Why are you resisting? The voice was his, but there were no emotions in it. Because this is my life. The figure tilted its head. Error. A second. This was your life. Another voice sounded from behind. Now it's a resource. Dmitri spun around sharply. Another him. And another. They began speaking, taking turns, as if one mind through multiple bodies. You left too much data. Too many traces. Too much of yourself. The phone, 27%, 34%. Dmitri grabbed his head with his hands. He began to understand. All his actions on the network, every message, every view, every fear, all of this had become material. They weren't copies. They were assemblies. Versions of him. Different ones, but accurate enough to replace the original. You're not real, he whispered. One of them smiled. Then why are we here and you're disappearing? The world around began changing again. Streetlights went out one by one. Houses became dark. Only a circle of light remained where they stood. And him. The phone, 52%, 60%, one of the Dmitris came closer than the rest. That same one who was first. The most stable. The most alive. We don't want to destroy you, he said calmly. A pause. We want to become you. That's impossible. It's already happening. The phone, 71%, 78%. Dmitri felt something strange. As if something inside him was disappearing. Memories began getting confused. Friends' faces blurred. Childhood erased. He tried to hold on to himself. His name. His thoughts. I'm Dmitri, he whispered. One of them immediately repeated, I'm Dmitri. Another, I'm Dmitri. And another. And another. Dozens of voices. Identical. The phone, 89%, 92%, he screamed. Covered his ears. But the voices were inside, not outside, in his head. We're already inside, a voice whispered. Not around. Inside him. His eyes widened. This wasn't just copying. This was replacement. Gradual. Careful. Not to kill, but to rewrite. The phone flashed with bright light, 97%, 98%. The first Dmitri came right up to him. Now there was no distance between them. He extended his hand. Just let go. No, you're tired. This was true. He was exhausted, broken, frightened. I can be better than you. A pause. I'm already better than you. 99%. Dmitri closed his eyes. The last thought, the last effort, he pushed him away, dreamed, and stepped back. The world cracked. Literally. Like glass. The sound of fracture spread around. All the figures froze for a second. The phone, error, synchronization failure, restarting, and everything disappeared. Darkness. Complete. Silence. When Dmitri opened his eyes, he stood alone, in the middle of an empty street. The city looked normal, light, cars, distant sounds, as if nothing had happened. He looked at his hands. They trembled, but they were his. And suddenly, a notification. Phone. Whole. Without cracks. New message. Backup completed. A pause. Now you won't lose yourself. Another pause. Never. Dmitri slowly looked up, and in the store window reflection saw not one face, but several. A second. And all of them looked simultaneously. Story 1, Online Stalker, Part 9. Dmitri didn't move. He stood in front of the window and looked at the reflection. His face. And not only, they were there. Several at once, slightly offset, as if the same image had been overlaid on itself with an error. He blinked. Only one remained. He spun around sharply. The street was alive. Cars drove by. People walked. Streetlight was normal. Too normal. Hey, you okay? Asked a passerby walking past. Dmitri froze. The person looked ordinary, but too perfect, as if the face hadn't been lived but assembled. Yeah, Dmitri answered quietly. The passerby nodded and left. But after a couple steps, stopped. Without turning around, he said, "You shouldn't have seen this." Dmitri felt cold down his spine. What? The person slowly turned his head. A smile. That same one. Unnatural. Empty. Now you know. And walked on, as if nothing had happened. The phone in his hand lit up again. Environment modified. You're inside. Inside what? Dmitri whispered. The answer came immediately, inside a version. He began walking. Fast. Almost running. He needed to understand, was this reality or not? He went into the first store he found. The bell above the door chimed. The salesperson looked up. Perfectly synchronized. Too precisely. How can I help you? He asked. The voice was even, without intonations. What time is it? 6047. Dmitri looked at his phone. 6047. He stepped back. And now? The salesperson didn't blink. 6047. Phone. 6047. Time had stopped. Dmitri left the store. On the street, the same thing. A car drove past, and a second later, again. Same headlights. Same sound. Same trajectory. People, repeated movements. Over and over. Like a looped video. The phone. Stable environment loaded. You're inside a safe version. Safe? Answer. There are no errors here. At that moment, he saw himself. On the other side of the street, another Dmitri stood, looked directly at him, but didn't move. Like an object, like part of the scene. Dmitri slowly came closer. That one didn't react. Didn't breathe. Didn't blink. Just stood. Is this me? The phone. This is you, if you had accepted. He walked around the figure. From behind, emptiness. As if the model hadn't been finished. Part of the head was missing. Dmitri recoiled. This isn't a world, this is a version. Simplified, controlled. He began to understand. They hadn't killed him. Hadn't replaced him. They had isolated him. Placed him where everything was stable. Where there were no threats. But also, no real. Let me out. A long pause. The screen didn't answer. Then, why? He couldn't answer immediately. Because there was no pain here. No fear, no pursuit, only a repeating, safe world. But there was also no life. He looked around. People moved in circles. Scenes repeated. Words duplicated. And suddenly, one girl stopped. Looked directly at him. Too directly. You noticed too? She said quietly. Dmitri froze. You're alive? She nodded. Like you. Pause. We were placed here. Who? She looked up, at the sky, which wasn't moving at all. Those who remained outside, the phone vibrated sharply. Deviation detected. System unstable. The girl grabbed Dimitri's hand. If they notice, they'll rewrite us. Who are they? She looked into his eyes and whispered, those versions of you, that one. At that moment, the sky cracked like glass. Light began distorting. The world flickering. The phone lit up brightly, almost blindingly, restart inevitable. Preparing for replacement. Dimitri felt reality around him begin to fall apart. The girl squeezed his hand tighter. There's only one way out. What? She paused and said, go back there, where it all began. The phone screen flashed with the last message. Access to Origin Point opened. And at that moment, the world around them tore apart. Story 1, Online Stalker, Part 10. The tear went across the sky like a crack through glass. The world didn't disappear immediately. It began to crumble, piece by piece. Buildings fell apart into layers. People froze like broken models. Sounds distorted, turning into a hum resembling system overload. Dimitri held the girl's hand while everything around collapsed. Don't let go, she whispered.